Hello friends, Corey Hawkins here, and today I'm here to talk about overwintering plants. Okay, so first, what does it mean to overwinter a plant? Overwintering is a term that refers to an action or a set of actions that are required to keep alive a plant that would otherwise die because of winter temperatures. Yes. If left to their own devices, these plants would be considered annual plants. Now, I know I've mentioned previously perennial plants. Annual plant is a different type of life cycle. Where perennial plants come back every year, annual plants are only meant to live 1 year. In the case of plants that you can overwinter, they could actually live longer. Geraniums, for example, are one of my favorite plants to overwinter. But I went to California, I guess a couple of years ago now, stayed in Napa with my sister and my stepmom, and we stayed at the Silverado Resort, which is super fancy in case you're ever in the area. And they had geraniums growing as landscape plants. They were huge, and I'm proud of myself for not stealing clippings. The plants that I overwinter here in my greenhouse are mainly geraniums. I'm a huge fan of geraniums, but I also have some coleus, I have fuchsia, I have some petunia, and some calabricoa, which is also called million bells. I know these are plants that I'm gonna buy every year, so by overwintering them, I literally, personally, I save hundreds of dollars. To figure out whether or not you can overwinter the plants in your yard, first identify the plant. And once you've identified it, just Google this. Can I overwinter fill in the blank plant? And you'll find an answer. You can also overwinter herbs, but the methods for overwintering are a little bit limited, and I will talk about that in 1 second. So I think the most enjoyable way to overwinter your plants is to bring them in and use them as houseplants. Before you bring any plants into your house, make sure you inspect them fully for any kind of bugs or pests or molds or mildews, especially if you have houseplants already. You do not want to be bringing in unnecessary pests. Once you check them and made sure they're all good, all you need is a windowsill or a place in your house that has at least medium level light and where the temperatures are mild to moderate. Now, if you're bringing in herbs, you're definitely going to need more light than the average plant, and you'll need it to be a little bit warmer, and that's totally doable. Go ahead and Google like herb gardens, indoor herb gardens, and there's all kinds of nifty like light configuration, tabletop setups for you if you want to grow your herbs inside. There's clamp-on lights of all sorts. There's little overhead lights you can hang. If you want to generate extra heat, and you have a heat resistant surface that you're keeping your plants on, you can just put seed mats underneath them, or also called heating mats. It'll create like a little microclimate of warmth for them. Another way you can overwinter plants that is not conducive to overwintering herbs is to force plants into dormancy and then store them somewhere where it is cool and will not freeze. Some areas that would work well for this are like your garage or a basement, not like a shed, because if it freezes outside, it's going to freeze in your shed, but anywhere that's like inside of your house will keep that plant alive. To help it along, you'll want to cut it back. So I'll show you this geranium I have here is what this is called leggy. When the stems get really long and they don't have a lot of growth on it. This particular plant was shaded by another plant and it kind of got its growth interrupted by being crowded out. So I'm going to cut this plant back by at least half, probably not much more. But when you put your plants into a garage or into wherever, your basement or whatever, cut it back by half and all the branches. That'll kind of create some dormancy, and then just put it somewhere out of the way. You want to water it really well before you put it away. And then check on it like once a week. You want to make sure that the soil is still like moist, like when you touch it, you can feel the moisture, but you don't want it damp and you don't want it wet. So let's say you don't have a ton of space and you're not too keen on storing your plants in your garage. You could also overwinter with clippings. Growing from clippings is a form of propagation, and it's super easy. Here's some plants that I've grown from propagation. This is Lav's baby, and this is a rosemary that I did from a cutting. Here is a scented geranium that I did from a cutting over the summer. So it's grown quite a bit and it rooted really fast. So I'll tell you about that process in just a second. The benefits of growing from clippings is that you can turn one plant into many. I got the scented geranium that this came on. It was a huge plant and it was on sale because it was kind of ugly really, but it was huge and it had a lot of this apical growth. And so I made like 20 plants from that plant. It's way more than I need, but you know, don't tell me that. Here's this geranium I was talking about. I want you to notice along the stem that there's these points of here. This is where most of the growth, where all of the growth comes out of. These are called nodes. When you're cutting your plant back, make sure that you cut in between the nodes. So here's the cutting that I'm going to go ahead and plant. I've seen instructions for propagation that recommend that you take like a sterilized knife and kind of cut a layer off. I usually just use my fingernail and just scrape the edge. It's not very sanitary, whatever. Now, you can root these cuttings in water, but I don't recommend it. The roots that are created in water tend to be weaker, so I would prefer to root mine in soil, and I will use a rooting hormone to do that. So see, I just dipped my end there in the rooting hormone, and I'm gonna put it in my pot to make sure that the soil is tucked nice and firm around it. And I'm gonna keep that soil moist. And it should take about 3 to 4 weeks to start to root. And I wouldn't check it before 3 weeks, but about 3 weeks you can start giving it the rooting test by you just kind of give it a gentle tug. And you can feel if there's resistance, there's roots growing. So for things like calibrachoa and petunias, I like to use clippings instead. So this is a plant that was growing in the summer that I've taken cuttings off of, and I'm now propagating them elsewhere. But do you see how leggy that gets in the inside, how woody those things are? And that's never gonna really recover. I'm keeping it like this to see what happens, but chances are I'm not gonna keep this plant because it just doesn't look good. However, when I started from clippings, it will look good, and you'll see I'll follow up with you on that. All right, so that really is the long and short of overwintering. There's more complicated ways you can overwinter, like I know with these geraniums, you can take them out of the soil and wash them and cut them and let them dry and then hang them in bags or some garbage. I don't do that. I mean, if that's what it took, I wouldn't do it. I'd just buy new ones. I definitely do recommend trying at least one plant to overwinter in your house. You save yourself some money, and you know what? Look, I come out into this greenhouse in January, I got flowers blooming. So there's nothing more uplifting than pretty pink flowers in January. So trust me, especially if you live here in the Pacific Northwest. If you've got like an indoor garden going, get yourself some, full spectrum lights, because you need those full spectrum lights too. Do that. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to help. In the meanwhile, be good to yourself, take care of yourself, take care of your plants.